Her phone lit up face up on the kitchen table, and for half a second I saw my own message land before she could turn it over. I expected to see my name. Daniel, 5 plain letters, the way it had read for 15 years. Instead, the screen said something else entirely. In her words, "Not mine, don't. You know better." The message was from me. The warning underneath it was hers, and I understood, standing in that kitchen with a screwdriver in my hand, that I had been saved in this woman's phone. For who knows how long, not as a person, but as a thing she kept telling herself to stop. I set the screwdriver down very carefully. I had come over to fix her fuse box. I was no longer sure that was the most broken thing in the house. My name is Daniel Hartley. I'm 34, and I fix furniture for a living, the kind people inherit and can't bring themselves to throw out. Chairs with one bad leg and 100 good memories soaked into the grain. It's quiet work. I'm good at it. I live alone in the flat above my workshop, and I tell people I like it that way, which is true in the daytime, and a little less true at night. My own mother died when I was 19. My father is a phone number I let ring out. So when I met Theo Whitlock in our first week of university, and he dragged me home for a Sunday roast that somehow lasted 6 hours, I didn't have the defenses other people have. I didn't politely decline a second invitation. I just stayed. 15 years, I stayed. Her name was Margaret. Everyone called her Maggie. She drank her tea out of a chipped blue enamel mug she flatly refused to replace, because Theo had bought it for her with his first ever paycheck, and she held it in both hands like the day owed her something warm. She asked the questions other people forget to ask, and, rarer than that, she remembered the answers. She had a laugh she kept on a short leash, and a way of going quiet that meant more than most people's talking. 3 years ago, she buried her husband, Gerald, a big laughing man who taught me to drive and never once made me feel like a guest. She did it standing very straight at the front of the church, which I have since learned is its own particular way of breaking. After Gerald, I kept coming. The gutter needed clearing. The porch step had gone soft underfoot. Someone had to look at that tap. I told myself a recently widowed woman shouldn't have to call a stranger for the small things. That's the story I told myself anyway. I have poor survival instincts around that kind of explanation. The night it finally cracked open started with a storm. Because of course it did. The power went out somewhere between the roast and the washing up, and the whole house dropped into that thick rural dark where you can actually hear the rain deciding to stay the night. Maggie lit 2 candles and 1 lemon-scented thing she'd apparently been saving for an occasion, and the kitchen turned gold and close and small. The radio kept playing off the battery, something old, something with strings. I told her I'd look at the fuse box. It lived in the hall cupboard behind 40 years of coats, so I crouched in there with my phone torch clamped in my teeth, flipping breakers and narrating my own failures, while she held a candle over my shoulder and laughed at me. Not the polite laugh, the real one, low and surprised out of her, the one that has always made me feel like I'd gotten away with something I shouldn't have. "You're enjoying this," I said. "I'm enjoying watching a grown man lose a fight to a cupboard," she said. "It's the most fun I've had all week." That landed somewhere it had no business landing. When the lights snapped back on, neither of us moved for a second. We were standing closer than the cupboard had strictly required. I could smell the lemon candle and the rain caught in her cardigan and the particular warmth of a house that has fed me for 15 years, and I had the clear, deeply unwelcome thought that I did not want to drive home. I blamed the storm. The storm was very convenient that way. Then her phone buzzed on the table behind us, face up, and I did the thing you do without thinking, reached over to flip it silent so she wouldn't have to break away. My own name should have been on the screen. I'd texted her a photo of the fixed breaker 30 seconds earlier as a joke. Instead, the screen showed me, in her own handwriting of the heart, a small instruction not to become the thing I was already becoming. Don't. You know better. I turned the phone face down gently, the way you set down something you've only just realized is fragile. She was still smiling about the cupboard. She hadn't seen me see it. I had come to fix the dark. I ended up driving home in it. For 3 days after that, I did the reasonable thing, which is to say I lied to myself with real conviction. It didn't mean anything. People save contacts strangely. Maybe it was a note about a different Daniel, a plumber, an old debt, a man from her church. Maybe Theo had said it as a joke years ago and forgotten. I built entire cathedrals of innocence in my head while I sanded a tabletop that did not need any more sanding, and I almost lived inside them. But I notice things for a living. That's the whole job. Really, finding the one joint quietly failing under a surface that looks completely fine. And what I kept noticing was this. I had quietly arranged the last year of my life around one woman's Sundays. I knew which nights she slept badly, because the lamp would still be on at 4 a.m. when I drove past on my way back from a delivery, and I had started taking the long route home so I could check. I had bought a chipped blue mug for my own cupboard, the closest match I could find, so there'd be one here and one there. I had never told a single living soul about that mug, because saying it out loud would have made it exactly what it was. She's grieving, I told myself. I'm convenient. That's all a man like me is to a house like that. I almost believed it. I'm very good at almost. The trouble with noticing for a living is that you can't switch it off when it gets inconvenient. I started catching myself. The way I'd save the funny thing that happened on a job to tell her. Specifically, the way you set aside the best bite on the plate. The way her name in my own phone, just Maggie, no warning, no armor, had become the only notification that made me reach for it instead of dread it. I was a man who had quietly furnished an entire inner life around a woman, the way you'd furnish a house you weren't sure you were allowed to live in, and I had done it all without once saying the word out loud, because the word would have cost me the house. Then the small things started arriving, the way they always do once you finally let yourself look. Theo said the first one, over a beer, with no idea he was saying anything at all. Mum's gone strange since Dad, he told me, picking the label off his bottle. Won't see anyone. Linda down the road tried to set her up with some widower. Golf, decent pension, the full package. And she turned him down flat. Says she's done with all that. He shrugged. I keep telling her she's allowed to have a life. She just looks at me like I've missed something obvious. I drank my beer and said nothing, which is a skill I have spent years developing. The next Sunday, I went to finally throw out the wobbly kitchen chair, the one I'd been promising to fix for 2 years, and she physically took it out of my hands. Leave it, she said. You said you'd get to it. As though the broken chair were a standing appointment. As though, for as long as it needed fixing, I had a reason to keep turning up, and we both got to keep pretending that was the reason. Then I opened the fridge for the milk and found a note in my own handwriting under a magnet. Back Sunday, left soup in the freezer. D. I'd scrawled it months ago on the torn-off back of an envelope. She had trimmed it into a neat little rectangle and laminated it. The soup was long gone. The note was preserved like something that mattered. I should say here that I am not a romantic man. I own exactly one suit and I bought it for a funeral. But a laminated note does something to a person it has no right to do. There was the photograph too. I'd never gone looking, I want that clear. But she sent me a picture once of a leak under the sink, for diagnostic purposes, and in the background, propped on the windowsill where the family photos lived, was a new one I didn't recognize. The three of us at Theo's birthday in the spring. Gerald's old spot on the sill still held his portrait, the way it always would, but she'd made room beside it for a picture with me in it, standing at her shoulder like I belonged there, and she'd put it in a frame. People don't frame the convenient handyman. People frame the people they've decided to keep. I told myself it was just a nice photo of her son. I am, as established, a coward with excellent technique. The one that finished me, though, came in through an open window. Her sister was visiting, and I was up the ladder clearing the gutter, which is its own metaphor I would rather not examine too closely, when I heard them in the kitchen below. "He's here again," the sister said, not unkindly, and Maggie, who has an answer for everything, who fills silences like it's her job, went quiet for one beat too long before she said, "He's family." 2 words. But she'd had to go and find them. They hadn't been waiting at the front of her mouth where the true thing lives. I nearly came off the ladder, not because I was careless, just because I had finally run out of safer places to put my hands. The Sunday it tipped over completely. Theo canceled. A work thing. Last minute. So it was the 2 of us in the gold kitchen with the radio going and the rain back at the windows, and we did the washing up the way we'd done it 100 times before. Me at the sink, her with the towel. The chipped blue mug passing back and forth between us like a small blue argument we both kept winning. I was extremely aware of the 8 inches between her shoulder and mine. I was aware of the radio, and the rain, and the specific careful silence of 2 people being very, very careful. Our hands met at the mug. Neither of us pulled away as fast as we should have. I have restored furniture that survived 2 world wars, and in that moment I could not have told you with any confidence where my own hands ended. We kept on with the dishes anyway, because the dishes were a reason to stand side by side and not say the thing, and we are both people who are good at finding reasons. She washed a plate that was already clean. I dried a glass long past dry. The radio rolled over into the next song, and the rain pressed its face to the dark window. And for a long minute the whole world narrowed to the small mechanics of 2 people refusing, very politely, to look at each other. She set the mug down. Too carefully. "It's quieter than I expected," she said at last, to the window, and not to me. After Gerald. Everyone warned me about the quiet. She turned the tap off. Though it was already off, nobody warned me it would only be unbearable on the Sundays you don't come. It would make a better story if I'd been brave right then. I wasn't. I dried my hands on the towel and said something useless about the chair, because retreat is at least a kind of motion, and I needed to be moving away from what was happening in my chest. "Daniel," she said my name the way you say a name when you've already decided something and you're just catching up to it out loud. "I'm going to tell you a stupid thing. And then you can pretend I never said it, and we will never do this again, and I'll be grateful to you forever for letting me." I should have handed her the exit door right there. She didn't wait for it. "I saved you under a different name in my phone," she said. "A long while ago now. Because every single time it lit up with your name, I felt something I had decided, very firmly, like a sensible woman, that I was not allowed to feel. A woman my age, my son's best friend. In my kitchen, of all the ridiculous places. She let out a breath that didn't quite make it to a laugh, so I changed it to a warning, so that every time you called, my own telephone would sit there and tell me to stop being a silly old woman who should know better. She finally looked up at me. It hasn't worked. It hasn't worked once. I went still in the way you go still, when a floor you've trusted your whole weight to makes a sound. The towel was still bunched in my hands. My chest had done something quiet and complicated that I had no instructions for. 15 years I'd spent being good at noticing, and somehow I had refused to notice the only thing in the room that actually mattered, because noticing it would have ended the safe and bearable version of my life. Maggie, my voice came out lower than I intended. You don't have to say any more than that. We can blame the storm. We can say a fuse blew and put it all back exactly the way it was. I'll come next Sunday and fix the chair, and neither of us ever has to. I don't want it put back. Quietly, she didn't step toward me, and she didn't step away. She just held her ground in the middle of the kitchen like she'd planted herself there. I've spent 3 years putting things back, Daniel, folding them up and putting them away where they're safe, and nobody can see them. I'm so tired. She swallowed. I would like, just once, to leave something out in the open where it can be seen, even if it's foolish. Especially if it's foolish. It isn't foolish, I said. I'm 56 years old, she said, like she was laying down a card she expected to win the hand. And you are my son's best friend, and you have your whole life still in front of you, and I have been telling myself every one of those things in that exact order, every Sunday, for a year. Her chin lifted. And not one of them has made me want you to stop coming. And that undid the careful thing I had been holding shut for the better part of a year. I bought a mug, I said, which was not even slightly what I had planned to say. A blue one. Chipped, like yours, closest I could find. It's been sitting in my cupboard at home for a year, and I've never once used it. I bought it so this kitchen would have one, and so would mine, and then I told myself it meant absolutely nothing. I put the towel down. My whole life has felt like a waiting room, Maggie. Every flat I've ever lived in felt like somewhere I was just passing through on the way to a real life that kept not arriving. This is the first place I have ever walked into and felt like I'd arrived. I stopped being able to tell, a long time ago, whether I kept coming back for the chair, or the gutter, or you. I made myself say the last of it plainly. It was you. I think it was always going to be you. She crossed the 8 inches herself. I want that part on the record. She chose it. Every single step of it. She lifted her hand to my jaw, right where the candlelight had been gold 3 weeks before, and I leaned down and kissed her as gently as I have ever done anything in my life, like a man setting down, at long last, something he has finally been told he's allowed to keep. Which was, naturally, the precise moment the front door banged open. Forgot my bloody keys, Theo stopped dead in the doorway, holding a set of car keys that had clearly betrayed him personally. He looked at his mother. He looked at me. He looked at the very small and very obvious distance between us. The radio kept playing. An entire era passed inside the space of 1 second. I'm going to need, he said, with enormous care, to sit down for this one. He took it about as well as a man can be expected to take walking in on his best friend, kissing his mother in the family kitchen, which is to say he didn't speak to me for 2 weeks. Then, on the 3rd week, he turned up at my workshop, sat himself down on a half-finished table I'd asked him 3 times not to sit on, and said, "If you hurt her, I will bury you in that garden you love so much, and I'll use your own good shovel." He picked up a chisel, turned it over, put it back down. But she laughed yesterday. At something genuinely stupid, I said. I hadn't heard that sound in 3 years, and I'd started to think I'd imagined it. He stood up. "So, don't make me get the shovel." That was his blessing. We took it, and we ran. It was slow after that. We were both careful people who had been broken in different places, and we built the thing the only way I know how to build anything, one good joint at a time. No shortcuts, proper drying time between every coat. A few months in, there were 2 chipped blue mugs living in one kitchen, and nobody pretended they were nothing anymore. She still steals the crust off my toast without asking. I still drive the long way past her window and feel my whole chest unclench when the 4A. M. Lamp is dark. Because dark means she's sleeping, and sleeping means she's all right. I fixed the wobbly chair eventually. She watched me do it from the doorway with her tea, and when I was done and it sat there steady and unremarkable on all 4 legs, she looked at it for a long moment and said, "Well, now what's your excuse?" So, I made a list. The back gate. The loose tile in the bathroom. The fence post that had been leaning since before I ever set foot in that house. A house that old always has something coming undone somewhere, which I have decided is the kindest arrangement a house can offer 2 people, a standing, never-ending reason to keep showing up for each other. I no longer need the reason. I keep the list anyway. Years later, when people ask how the 2 of us ended up together, she tells it her way, and I tell it mine. And the part we both always tell is the part about the phone. Because a little while after that storm, she handed it to me across the table and showed me she'd finally changed the name back. It didn't say Daniel anymore. And it didn't say a warning. It said home. Nothing important had appeared overnight. It had simply, finally, stopped hiding. What would you have done if you'd looked down and seen your own name saved in someone's phone as a warning they'd been quietly giving themselves? And have you ever talked yourself out of something true for so long that the talking itself became the only thing you had left to hold on to? Tell me your story in the comments. If this one stayed with you, leave a like, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.